Well, hi, and welcome to episode 2 of Keeping Well in Strange Times. A few things today. On the serious side, I've got a short interview with Phil Wheeler, the head of evangelism and new churches, who's going to share a bit about what some people have been living in isolation for a lot longer than we have found helpful. And then we'll share a few memes sent in by people and one that I was forced to create myself.
Yeah, a couple of the mission pastors here in Sydney, we get together and chat, and we're talking about evangelism in this kind of context. And they made contact with Darren, who's the mission pastor there in St Andrews at Kowloon, and he had a bunch of things that they've learned now. They've been doing it for 6 weeks, and so he had 5 or 6 things. So the first one was to settle in and to take this seriously. They didn't actually take it seriously initially. They thought, oh, this will all be over in a couple of weeks. We'll go back to normal. So they started to do things in a bit of an ad hoc kind of a way, a bit of this, a bit of that, etc. Well, he said, no, you've actually got to settle down, get things organized, get your Zoom working at home or your Google Hangout or whatever it might be, set up your office, because you're going to be doing this from your office and from your lounge room for a long time yet. It could be get months yet we're doing this. And so take the time to work it out, get into good patterns and good habits now, because you're going to be there for a while. Secondly, he said they didn't really take it, they didn't tackle it head on. So, for example, the church kept up its series in John's Gospel or whatever it was, rather than actually stop and realize this is a big thing. Everyone is affected by this. This is a kind of a global thing. So how do we actually tackle this head on and actually address people's fears and concerns rather than just business as usual? So he thought I thought that was helpful to face it head on. Thirdly, he said, expect to feel underemployed. Expect to feel a little bit dislocated at this point, because everything's changed. All your normal patterns of life and of ministry have just gone out the door. And so he's got that constant feeling of, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing enough, etc.? And so not to be surprised at that kind of feeling that you've got of underemployed, underengaged. And then I think helpfully he also said there was a sense in which early on people thought they could flee from this. So perhaps you're an expat, you could just get on the plane, fly back to your own country, but it's back there now. A lot of them come from Europe and they went back to Europe or to France or to Spain or England or wherever, and you're facing it there, perhaps even worse. So you can't actually flee from this. You've actually got to face it. And I think that's helpful, isn't it? Often we want to flee from suffering and flee from difficulty, get on a plane or whatever it might be. But you can't. So actually you've got to trust God in a new context. What is God teaching us and growing us and helping us to conform us to the likeness of Christ in this context? Face it and deal with and trust God in a new context.
Now,
and
Phil,
then finally,
stop you at that point, because I just wanted to ask you a question there. I mean, you yourself, you've actually come back from South America a couple of weeks ago, and you actually had to be in isolation for 2 weeks. So there's been a bit of just kind of dealing with it yourself in your own situation. What's been helpful for you in terms of working out how to trust God?
Here I am in my daughter's bedroom. I had to live upstairs in a separate bedroom, separate bathroom, etc. Being married to a doctor doesn't help you because she's absolutely fastidious about the rules. So yeah, there was confronting. I must admit I was a bit grumpy and climbing the walls and not been particularly fun to be around because I'm up here in isolation. But then I guess you just in time you just think, well, it is what it is. How can I actually face this positively? How can I make the most of this? What can I actually do? So I made a list of, job list for isolation and things that I thought I could do for my work, even from isolation, etc. So that's finished now, mercifully. But also, I suddenly realised other people had it way worse. So I could have been in a hotel room in the city, just cooped up in a room. I've got friends there in the Novotel or whatever. They've got to stay in their room. That's it. You can't even go outside the door. You can't go down to the gym or you can't go down to the restaurant. You're in your room with no balcony and no fresh air for 2 weeks. So I suddenly thought, man, it wasn't that bad. At least I could go for a walk. So yeah, there's a bit of that perspective thing you've got to get actually on the context you're in. And indeed, God makes everything beautiful in its own time. It's given to us for a reason. How can we actually make the most of that time? What are the blessings actually that are here? More time with family, more time for conversations. People are spending more time playing games together in a way that they weren't before. Or my neighbours are chatting to me in the street with social distancing, of course, more than they were before. So how can I make the most of it? That was the final thing he said. How do I turn this into opportunity rather than problem? And I think that's exactly the right mindset that a Christian person with the hope of the gospel, the hope of eternity ought to be able to do. Take anything and turn it around to be that positive. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, Phil, thanks for your
Those
time.
are the lessons.
Really appreciate it. That's great. Really helpful.
So some really helpful stuff there for us from Phil. Particularly I found helpful just thinking about just accepting that things go a bit slower and that sometimes you feel a little less useful, and just trying to come to terms with what's kind of the new normality look like. And I think being challenged to not just to run away, but to keep remembering to think deeply and biblically about what we're experiencing. Now for a little bit more lighthearted stuff. I got a couple of memes sent in by people, nothing specifically college related. So one of our students sent something in, and one of our staff members sent something in, so I'm going to share both of those with you. And then because no one sent in anything about Moore College, I'm going to share with you one that I created myself. Okay, well, that's it for episode 2 of Living Well in Strange Times. I hope you are keeping well in these strange times. See you next week.